In previous episodes, we established that things are going very badly. We are dying out, increasingly living alone, and losing our minds. Naturally, all of these are closely interconnected processes, which, being entirely objective in nature, have been unfolding in our civilization for the last 250 years. People ask, so what are we supposed to do? It has to be admitted that right now I feel like saying, nothing. Things are only going to get worse. And of course, that is indeed the case. Globally, things really are going to get worse, and there is no chance for the situation to improve, nor can there be. At the same time, at the level of the individual, at the level of your own very specific life, it is still possible to change something. That is what we are here for today. Everything in the world can be examined analytically, that is, by breaking it down into its constituent parts. Science does this very well, and happiness is no exception. If at this point you wanted to disagree and say, no, happiness is beyond all your studies and analysis, it's elusive and constantly slips through our fingers like sand. Don't rush. It is, of course, not beyond analysis, and it is not slipping anywhere. We're going to go through everything now, and at the end of the episode, I'll ask you, are you happy now? And you'll smile and say, yes. Subscribe everywhere, and let's begin. Psychophysical health. The first factor that determines our happiness is psychophysical health, or the overall condition of our body and mind. This is an absolutely fundamental thing because it determines whether we are capable of functioning properly at all. Everything begins, as always, and I never stop repeating this, with sleep. Unfortunately, many people only pretend that sleep is important while living as though it doesn't matter at all. Metal Earth, what can you say? Chronic sleep deprivation worsens mood, increases irritability, and reduces the ability to experience pleasure, while long-term sleep deficiency leads to various mental disorders. Both the duration and the quality of sleep matter. In other words, we not only need to get our biological norm of sleep, on average, the famous 8 hours, but also make sure that sleep is deep, which means creating the darkest and quietest environment possible. As always, this is not my personal opinion. We know this from an endless number of studies because sleep is an extremely well-researched topic. If you have once again asked yourself, can it really be that serious? Then once again I answer, yes, it really is that serious. Fix your sleep schedule. The next component is physical activity. We need to move regularly. If there is no movement, happiness is unlikely to happen. Do whatever you want, an hour-long walk every day, swimming, light jogging, the gym, football, tennis, anything at all, but move consistently. If you cannot do something every day, then do something at least every other day. There is no magic in movement itself, just as there is no magic in anything else. We're talking about thoroughly studied and often rather primitive biochemical processes. The point is that during physical activity, neurotransmitters and hormones begin functioning differently, and this has a beneficial effect on the body. Sensitivity to dopamine and serotonin increases, cortisol levels decrease, and so on. The next factor is the absence of chronic stress. We underline the word chronic. Stress is absolutely unavoidable and therefore normal to a certain extent. But living in a state of constant stress strongly affects both the mind and body, obviously in a negative way. Chronic stress means elevated cortisol, poorer sleep, anxiety, irritability, and emotional exhaustion. At this point, it should become obvious that all these factors are, of course, deeply interconnected. Track the main sources of stress in your life and start working on them. And now let's move on to illness. Constant pain exhausts the nervous system and dramatically lowers quality of life. This is especially true when pain seriously limits us in some way. And here I cannot help but say, oh yes, the thing is, I suffered terribly with my back, especially considering that all of my work happens while sitting down. I remember writing in my journal that at that moment I had almost everything, yet felt absolutely miserable because due to the pain, I literally could not sit through a single lesson. It is truly terrifying. I have not completely healed my pain, but I have improved it significantly, and you should treat yours too, because otherwise happiness will not come. Quality social connections. The next factor is quality social connections. We underline the word quality. Having dozens or hundreds of friends on social media does not necessarily mean anything. We are talking about stable, emotionally meaningful, trusting, and supportive relationships with other people. Why is this the case? Once again, because of our evolutionary background. Human beings are deeply social creatures, and our psychology developed under conditions of constant group belonging. For this reason, social isolation, regardless of the cause, is perceived as a fundamental threat. Your relationships with others should be subjectively experienced as close relationships that provide feelings of acceptance, safety, and involvement. If you have nothing like this, if you have felt lonely for months or years, then do not be surprised if there is no happiness in your life. And if you continue like this, it is unlikely to appear. Find yourself a woman if you are a man. Find yourself a man if you are a woman. Do not miss opportunities to meet people in the physical world. Visit new places. Pray to God for meaningful social connections. Do whatever you want, but stop being alone. I understand perfectly well that this is much harder to do than to say. Perhaps I understand this better than anyone. In my case, relief from the crushing and, I would say, all-destroying feeling of loneliness happened in two ways. First, through inner work and realizing who I am, along with a number of acceptances that followed from that realization. Second, through the channel, or more precisely, through the students who came from the channel. When we meet, we have extremely high-quality communication straight out of a textbook, exactly as I just described. Some became good acquaintances, some became friends. It unquestionably heals. Financial stability. The next factor influencing our happiness is financial stability. Let us immediately clarify that we are not talking about wealth. We are not talking about millions of dollars. They are completely unnecessary, although at times it may seem otherwise. Financial stability affects happiness not through luxury, but through the ability to comfortably meet basic needs. If a person spends years living paycheck to paycheck, if money barely covers food, housing, and clothing, then that person will experience constant stress. In practice, this is a permanent survival mode in which a person constantly feels vulnerable and threatened, often without even realizing it. The main question is, how much money significantly affects happiness? Enough to satisfy those basic needs: housing, food, safety, healthcare, education, recreation, and spontaneous purchases. Depending on the region, the average range in developed countries lies somewhere between $3,000 and $7,000 per month. In less developed countries, much less. Let us ask ourselves, is it possible to live normalno on $3,000 to $4,000 per month? And let us answer honestly, yes, it is. In most cases, this amount will cover all basic needs and still leave something extra. Research suggests that moving from poverty to financial stability has a strong effect on happiness. But beyond that point, even multiple increases in income produce either moderate effects or none at all. This happens because with that level of income comes a sense of control over one's life, because now you can make plans and not be overly afraid when something suddenly goes wrong. You know how we constantly think, what if I get sick when I have no money for treatment? What if the couch breaks? What if the computer breaks? And so on. So happiness is definitely not found in money, but becoming happy while remaining poor is most likely not going to happen either, although, as always, there are nuances. For example, there are many people from less developed countries who, despite their objective poverty, still feel happy. You may know such people personally. Usually these are older people. How can this be explained? Two factors are at work here. First, education level. For in much wisdom is much grief, and he who increases knowledge increases sorrow. Put less dramatically, the more you know and understand, the more detailed your picture of reality becomes, and the more potential problems you notice. A person begins thinking not only about what is happening right now, but also about what may happen in a month, a year, or 10 years from now. They understand risks, economic constraints, social problems, political instability, and the vulnerability that follows from them more clearly. If you possess at least some intelligence, then a certain degree of carelessness available to people with no intelligence at all becomes unavailable to you. Second, social comparison. Poverty normalized becomes normality rather than poverty. This is one of the finest aphorisms I've come up with in my life. The point is that if everyone around you lives very modestly, then your own very modest life will not feel especially bad. It will simply feel normal. Yes, you live paycheck to paycheck. Yes, you cannot spoil your child. Yes, you have not seen the world and never will. But everyone around you lives the same way, so there is no reason to pay too much attention to it. We are alive, we are healthy, thank God for that. Self-actualization. Next comes self-actualization, which should be understood as the feeling that you are not merely passively existing, but living according to your interests and realizing your potential. When this is absent, people often begin experiencing a sense of inner emptiness. If we break self-actualization down into components, we get the following. First, autonomy, or the ability to influence your own life and make your own decisions. We feel happier when we are subjects rather than objects. Second, competence. It is important for us to feel that we are doing something well, developing and becoming more effective. Feelings of uselessness and the absence of progress often lead to apathy. Third, meaning. If one's work is experienced as mechanical repetition of the same actions that provide little benefit and do not seem important, then even a completely independent person who performs their work well is unlikely to enjoy it. At the same time, it must be emphasized that self-actualization is not the same thing as success in the social sense. It does not necessarily require high status, fame, or large amounts of money, which are usually assumed by default when discussing this topic. For one person, it may be a scientific career. For another, it may be the bushes outside their house that they personally trimmed beautifully. The key factor here, of course, is the subjective feeling of fulfillment. If you struggle with this, if you feel that you are doing the wrong thing, know that you need to leave but something is stopping you, then come to coaching. Here we work with situations and states that can be described as, I'm confused. It can be absolutely anything, literally any area of life. Finances, for example. Why am I unable to save money even though I seem to earn a lot? I do not understand how to scale further, and so on. If too much has piled up and you realize that you do not understand what is happening, then come and we will untangle it all. Personality traits. And now, an unexpected turn. We have just discussed psychophysical health, quality social relationships, financial stability, and self-actualization. If things are going well in these areas, then you will be happy. There seems to be little to argue with here because it is simply common sense, is it not? As it turns out, even here, things are not so simple. In 2024, an article was published claiming that our happiness is extremely closely connected to stable personality traits. We are talking about correlations exceeding 80%. I would like to pause here and repeat this once again. More than 80%. In psychology, this is exceptionally rare because researchers often begin claiming they have discovered something significant when correlations reach merely 10 to 20%. So, the authors ask the following question. To what extent is our sense of happiness connected to stable personality traits rather than money, relationships, health, careers, and other life circumstances? And they arrive at the following conclusion. Once various methodological distortions are removed, life satisfaction begins to almost completely overlap with a certain personality profile. It turned out that happy people are, on average, significantly less anxious and emotionally unstable, more energetic, more engaged with life, more active, more organized, and more confident in their abilities. Low life satisfaction was especially strongly associated with feeling misunderstood, lack of interest, indecisiveness, envy, boredom, feeling exploited, as well as feeling ineffective and unrewarded for one's efforts. The authors also emphasize that this does not necessarily imply simple causality in the sense that personality traits directly cause happiness. Rather, the point is long-term mutual reinforcement between personality and life experience. Our personality affects what decisions we make, what relationships we build, what work we choose, how we react to problems, how we interpret events, and what situations we repeatedly find ourselves in. Over time, all of this begins reinforcing itself. For example, an anxious, indecisive, and constantly dissatisfied person will eventually create a life around themselves that further reinforces dissatisfaction. An energetic, stable, and active person, naturally, tends toward the opposite. Thus, the main conclusion here is the following. We are used to thinking that happiness is primarily a collection of external circumstances, money, good work, health, environment, and so on. The article does not claim that these things are unimportant. It argues that there is a deeper level, the structure of our personality. It is this structure that determines how we interpret situations and whether we are capable of experiencing life satisfaction at all. Be sure to write what you think about this. Imagine that you have no major health problems. Your body functions normally, and you always have the energy you need. Beside you is a loving partner whom you love in return, and things between you are going well. You also have reliable, wonderful friends. Your life, freedom, and property are not under threat. You have a stable income that covers all basic needs and allows you to save money. You do work that you love, work that fills you with a sense of meaning and importance. You manage your time well, constantly develop yourself, and do not focus on the negative. You are confident that things will work out and that the future will only get better. Are you happy now?